Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of people need the IELTS to either stay here or get some sort of work, and same it's the same experience that I have as well, and it can be quite a anxious thing to do as you prepare and wait for the results even. So we talked about why we're doing the IELTS. I think all of us are quite clear why we are preparing for it. So I'll just start by going through the structure of the IELTS. It may be already very clear, but when I was preparing, I got a diagram to see exactly how long was each test for, what are the tests, and also what's the band for each. So some things that I thought about was, for the speaking is a different session from the others. Also, the shortest one can be the most nerve-wracking one as well, because you one-to-one speaking and you can't. It's unpredictable. You don't know what question you're going to get. For listening and reading, it's easier to prepare by yourself, because you can just practice and you don't need external feedback. It's whether you got the correct answer or not. And then writing is another one that I think most people struggle with. And for me, it was the one that I spent the most time preparing as well. So the next few slides, we'll go through each one of them, each section, how I approach them. So for listening, the listening is divided into 4 sections, 10 questions from each section. The first 2 parts is all social conversation. So the first one is usually a conversation, so like 2 people talking, and then you have to figure out what they're talking about, listening for facts. The second one is usually one person talking, so you have to catch what the person is saying, but it's a social situation, it's just a conversation. The third and fourth one is more like you're listening to a report, a more formal sort of conversation, maybe a lecture or something like that. So the first one is like in a tutorial or seminar. You have to catch details that people are saying. Not only details, but sometimes what the implicit thing they're trying to say, like what were their feelings. It might not be set out in the recording, but you have to be able to figure out the underlying sort of thoughts that they are thinking about in your mind. And then the last one is it's like listening to a lecture. So in terms of the format, what I remember was they only play it once, and each question is worth 1 mark, and it's in chronological order, meaning if you look at the question and you say, oh, how come I've been waiting for this, and they haven't said it for so long, if you read the next question and they said something about it, then you know, like, I'm behind, so you have to quickly jump a few questions to see where you are. And generally it gets harder and harder, the recording, and after the whole recording, you have 10 minutes to fill in the answers as well. So how I prepared for it was, I got multiple recordings and the exam book, and I just kept practicing and marking myself based on that. And if I got the question wrong, then I'll rewind and figure out why I got it wrong, and then write down on a book like why I made that mistake. And then before the exam, I'll read through the possible reasons why I make mistakes, so that I avoid those mistakes during the exam. And then it's also nice to set a target. Like, so for example, out of 40 questions, if you get 16 correct, then the next time I want to get 23 correct. And if I manage to hit this band at 23, then the next time I'll say I want to try to get 30 questions correct. So I just keep challenging myself to get higher and higher. And then on the exam day, because the recording is only played once, so if you miss the answer, just continue and then come back during that 10 minutes to think about it. Don't like think about what the question is while the recording is playing, because you just miss more answers. And then also read the rules. So usually they say no more than 3 words. So if you put 4 words, there's no marks. So you have to put maximum 3 words only. And then between each recording, there's sometimes like a short break, or you know that they are not going to say much. They might be saying like, oh, now it's the next section or something like that. Then I use that opportunity to read all the questions, read ahead, so that I can know what I'm going to expect coming up. So that's how I prepared for the listening. And it's because I'm a native speaker for English. It's my main language. So for me, was more of a practice rather than training. So just keep practicing for myself. But I know some of you may have different challenges, and if you have like questions later, we can talk about it, or you can share among yourself how you prepare if you're not a native speaker of English. So for reading, there's 3 passages for this section, and there's 40 questions, and the number of questions for each of the section varies. So there's no set way that it will be. The text can come from magazine, journal, books, newspapers, and sometimes it will contain diagrams, graph, or illustrations. There's various ways that the passages are. Usually there will be a few types. Sometimes it's just a narrative, like a story, and sometimes it's a report, or sometimes it can be an argument. So at least one of the passages will contain a detailed argument. That's often the hardest one. And in total, for the 3 passages, you'll be reading about 2,000 to 2,750 words. And there's 10 types of questions that you can get. So I've listed the 10 types of questions that you can get over there. And for me, often the hardest one is the true or false question. Yeah, that's the hardest for me. But the rest, I still find it okay. Yeah. So same thing for this one, practice. So especially for the true and false question, if I get it wrong, I will write down why I got it wrong or what did I miss. And try all the question types. So make sure when you practice, you get to practice across all of the question types. And set a target. Same for listening. And since there's 3 passages, you shouldn't spend more than 20 minutes on each section. And because the last one is the hardest, so if you start from the front and you take 25 minutes for the first one, 25 minutes for the second one, then you end up with not enough time for the hardest question. So you should try to save time at the start and spend more time towards the end. And if you're not sure and you're trying to save time, just come back later. Get all the easy marks and then try to fill in, and then try to figure out the harder marks later. So for speaking is on a different day usually from the other 3 sections, and it's between 11 to 14 minutes. Just let me see what. Okay. So it's divided into 3 sections. The first part is usually basic question: what is your name? Where do you come from? Tell me about the place that you live in. It might ask you about what are your hobbies. For me, I feel this part you can prepare. You can think through what you want to say first, so that you don't have to think about it on the spot. And this is good because you can put in some interesting things or use certain terms in that part. So for example, people ask you where you come from, I'll say Singapore. I won't stop at Singapore. I'll say I come from Singapore. It's a port city. Some people call it the little red dot because it's just a dot on a map. So I already prepare what roughly I'm going to say. But for me, I prefer not to memorize it. You just jot down in dot point before that, like list the things that you want to say, and then let it flow when you are speaking on it. Otherwise, it will feel very rehearsed. And I think the examiner would be able to pick up if you have memorized exactly what you want to say. So make it feel natural as well. The second part is, the part 2, usually you get a task card. So they'll say, tell me about a most memorable time in your life, or tell me about your favorite place to spend time with. Tell me about your most memorable vacation spot or something. And then there will be dot points to say what you must cover, like when was it, where is it, can you describe what you did. So for this one, you get a paper and a pencil, and you can jot down what you want to say. So my recommendation is always try to cover all the points inside, so you get like the marks for like the content, so that you meet the criteria of the question, and also use the opportunity to think as well, like write down something so you can refer to the paper when you are talking. And then the next part, the discussion, the third part, often is something to do with the second question. So for example, if the question is tell me about your favorite vacation spot, then the discussion might be like, do you think it's good? Do you think traveling is a good thing? Something like that. So it's always slightly linked. But the third question is more of a discussion question. It's not personal experience, but it is about debating a topic. Yeah. So how I prepared. So my first step was to watch YouTube videos. There's some good YouTube videos out there that I found really useful. And for me, it was inspiration. Like, oh, okay, I can say it this way. Yeah. I wasn't copying it, but I was using the same style. Like share something. How do I put it? You'll be able. For me, it was picking out something that they shared that was interesting, and then putting it into my personal context. For this one, practice. But the difference between this and the other parts is you need feedback. Unless you record yourself. But even if you record yourself, it's good to have someone else to tell you how you are doing. I know it can be hard, especially if you're shy, you don't want people to hear your voice. And I was lucky because my wife said she can help me with it. So I just talked to my wife and she gave me some suggestions about how to improve. So that's one option. Or find someone that you're close to, find a relative, find someone that's a native speaker of English and you can practice with them. And then, so I said make a list of common questions, especially for the first part that you can prepare for, and then think about what you can potentially say. And then avoid memorizing exactly what you want to say as well, because it will affect, for example, if you forgot something, then it will be very difficult to be like, oh, I forgot something, and you might get stuck, and it's quite obvious. So exam, yes, remember it's a separate session. Use the pen and paper to plan your response. And also the third thing is, if you don't, so this part you have 4 to 5 minutes, maybe 1 to 2 minutes, because 1 to 2 minutes to prepare, and then 1 to 2 minutes to answer the question. If you don't speak for the complete 2 minutes, you get points taken off for stopping early. So just keep talking until they say it's enough, stop. Like, I've heard enough, then you stop. Otherwise, just keep talking. Don't stop. Yeah. So this one is like the marking scheme for the speaking part. And there's 4 things you can be graded on. And then I cut off the 6 points and 5 points because I know most people aiming for about 7, 8, 9, right? So I'm not going to think about 5 and 6 points, but aiming for 7, 8, and 9 points. So in the end, they'll take an average of the 4. So if you know there's certain parts that are easier to prepare for beforehand to maximize the marks, so that even if other parts you get lower marks, in the end, when you average the mark out, you get a higher mark. So I think the easiest one to prepare is these 2 sections. So fluency and coherence is that you are speaking continuously, you're not stammering. So for that, if you write down what you want to say on a piece of paper, I think it's easier to talk. It's like a cue card. You know what you're going to say next. And then also, for the first part, if you're, for example, the introduction question, where are you from? If you already have a few points that you want to cover, then you'll be more fluent. It's like preparing for a presentation. It's like me preparing for this presentation. I already thought about what exactly I want to say, so it's more fluent. And then the lexical resource is like your vocabulary. So I see some people studying vocabulary. Yeah, so this part is to improve this part over here. So you can learn some more complex vocabulary or idioms that you think you would want to use. So it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. That's like, you can prepare a few that you want to use, that you think you will be able to use, and or just read some idioms, the common ones, so that you can remember them. So these two are the easiest ones to prepare. And then this two is mainly for me was to practice and get feedback. So practice talking and then get the person to provide feedback to you. And also listening to others. So listening to YouTube, how people describe things helped me as well to learn how I should be describing things. There's no marks lost for being politically incorrect. So there's no wrong opinion. Yeah. So you're not supposed to get marks deducted for that. So it doesn't matter what your views are as long as you're able to articulate them and say them properly. And then yes, the final mark is the average of the 4 categories. So you can try to boost the mark here, and even if this doesn't do so well, in the end when you average it out, you get a higher score. Yes.
So with the speaking especially, because it's so short, it's very important to practice with the time. So not just talking on and on and on and you don't know like what the time frame is. So you need to approximately know, okay, this is me talking for 3 minutes. And it's hard to know that unless you're doing it a couple of times, because you either have it too short or then you haven't covered the whole stuff because you're trying to talk for too long. That's both for the introduction as well as the middle bit when you get that, what was it, 2 minutes or something?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so it's a very standard time, but you just like, it's hard to have that concept of how long it is unless you keep practicing it.
Yeah, so my Winnie practiced with me, and at first I went too short, so I stopped, and then it's like, oh, I only talked for 1 minute 30 seconds, and then that means losing points. So then I realized, oh, I have to talk longer. And sometimes you talk too long, but you can't cover everything.
So
and that's
say
no good
like
as
the
well.
task card, so you have a list of questions, but then because you're trying to make it sound very elaborate and very fancy, so then like you end up only covering 2 out of the 4 questions. Well, you're not going to get like the full marks in that case.
Because they have dot points of what you have to cover. If I talk 2 minutes on one point, you're not completing the requirements of that section. Yeah. So this part practicing helps a lot, especially with somebody else and with a timer, like what we do. So the writing part. So this is funny. There's a difference between academic and general. So when I first did the IELTS, I didn't know that I had to do academic, so I did general. So I did it twice. I did general once, then I did academic. So so yeah, and my points improved from general to academic. So in fact I practiced twice. That's why I think it helped to improve my score. So I took the exam twice. So yes, remember you're doing apply for the right one. Don't apply for the wrong one. Find out if it's general or academic IELTS. Okay, so the writing is divided into 2. The first part is usually looking at a graph or figure, and then the second part is you write an essay. 60 minutes. 20 minutes should be for part 1 and 40 minutes should be for part 2. Yeah. So in task 1, so the first part is usually a graph or a table, and then you have to describe that graph. The minimum number of words is 150. If you write less, you lose marks. But at the same time, if you write more, you waste more time. So what I found useful was I printed out the exam paper, the exact exam paper, and then I start writing, and then I gauge the number of words I write by the number of lines. So I don't have to count word by word how many I write. So I know if I cover like 1.5 page, that's 150 words. So I don't have to think a lot. As long as I reach 1.5 page, I know it's time to stop. Yeah, so that for me I found useful instead of wasting time counting words. And then don't take more than 20 minutes, because if you take more than 20 minutes here, you get very stressed for the second part, which is worth even more marks. Yeah. Be careful about the period of time. Oh yeah, so past or present tense, very important here. And use a variety of structure. Okay. So the strategy in general is at the start, you summarize what you see. So I put some example here. These are the types of things that you can come across. So like, there's a map. These are past questions, I think. This is a map. This is a bar chart. This is a line graph. This is a pie chart. So before you start, it's best to explain what you're looking at. Like, this is a map of this place. And usually at the start of the question, they'll tell you what it is. But you can't copy exactly what they tell it is. You have to paraphrase what it is. You can't use the exact same words. And then explain overall in 1 or 2 sentences the overall trend. So you might say, like, for this one, the overall trend is increase in, depending on what it is, between 1980 to the year 2030. 2030 is expected that the amount of petrol and oil use will increase. And then after that, you go into specific details of what the what the graph is about. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, like, because it's just too technical for an overview. But if you have questions later, we can discuss about it. So you don't have to explain everything, and you don't have to give reason for it. So if the amount increased, you don't have to explain why it increased. You just have to say it increased. Yeah. And I think here, one way of improving your vocabulary, right? So I didn't just say increase, I'll say increase slowly, or if it increase and flat like this, right? I say plateau, like flat means plateau. So I'll find some more higher class words in my mind, prepared already to answer the question. Yeah.
Is this the one that you had the different types of graphs?
Yeah. So I prepare for every type of graph. I already prepare what are the possible words that I can use. So I already know if it's increased. If it increased by a lot, I'll say increase exponentially. In my mind, I already remembered I'm going to use that word. And if it increased slowly, then I'll use another word. Or if it's flat, I won't say it was a flat trend. I'll say the amount plateaued or something. So I'll find specific words for each one to use already. Yeah. So for example, this one, I'll say increase exponentially, the black one over here. Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Okay, task 2 is usually you're given a point of view or opinion, and then you have to discuss it. For this one, the minimum is 250 words. You can't, same thing, you don't want to write less than that, and it's worth 2/3 of the marks. So it's more important than the first part. So you don't want to spend too much time on the first part. So the important thing is to organize your answer well as well. Opening paragraph, and then there's different styles, but for me, I usually introduction paragraph, for, against, and then a conclusion. Let's see. So the strategy here recommended is read the question carefully. So sometimes different questions ask different things. Sometimes you don't have to provide argument against it. Sometimes you just have to describe something. So it depends on what the question is asking you for. Then you have to address the question appropriately. Don't go out of topic, because you go out of topic, no marks. And usually I will plan have a mind map first and prepare because of the limited time. And yeah, so this is the same thing I said, right? Introduction, main paragraph, and conclusion. And then at the end, I'll just check the answer. So I usually reserve about 5 minutes to go through the passage, because sometimes you might have missed something and then you get marks deducted off. So you might finish the whole thing, but there might be a lot of grammar errors. So I'll check through one time, make sure I have enough time to check through once to correct any errors so that I can maximize the grammar marks. Yeah. So preparation. So for me, I went into the detail of using pen or pencil as well. So for me, my thought is if I make a lot of errors, I want to use pencil because I can erase and change if I make a grammar mistake instead of cancelling, and then you run out of space. You don't know where to put your new word. So I use a eraser and pencil. I think these are provided by the IELTS, at least in Singapore. They provide the equipment. So I find pencil easier because I can erase. And then keep practicing with a pen or pencil, whichever you choose throughout, because the feeling is the same. And then practice all the question types as well. So I was saying, like, practice all the types of questions that you can get. And also for the part 2, there's different question types as well. Practice all of them. There's useful material online. There's a lot of links, but I found this one quite useful, so you can try. And time yourself, very important. You want to make sure you can write a good, long enough essay in the allocated amount of time. And yet, during the exam, I make sure 20 minutes, 40 minutes. So this is the marking scheme for the academic part. So task achievement, so that's why I said read the question properly to make sure that you're answering the question, so to maximize the task achievement one. And then coherence, that's why I write a mind map out to make sure I cover all the points or how I'm planning how I want to answer the question. Otherwise, it's not coherent. So if you don't have an introduction, you don't have like 1 or 2 paragraphs and then the conclusion, then you get marks taken off for that. So just by meeting the criteria, introduction, conclusion, 2 main paragraph, you already increase the marks in this section. And then for lexical resource is learn some standard vocabulary as well, like, exponentially or plateau, that sort of thing. You can prepare beforehand, some of them. And then for practice, for grammar, then it's really about practice and getting feedback, because if it's wrong, you might not be able to tell it's wrong. Unless someone reads it, then they'll tell you, oh, this is incorrect. So then we need to review my writing as well to figure out whether there's anything wrong. Yeah. So other thoughts was I prepare in advance. I make sure I prepare 1 month in advance because I only want to do it once. I don't want to do it again. And I know it's hard, especially if you're working or if you got family, you got other commitments. So I generally prepare 1 or 2 hours a day. But also I recognize even if I can't meet it, it's okay. That's why I say I prepare. I thought about it. I say I start from 1 month. If I miss a few days, it's going to be okay. There'll always be more important things that will come up. Like IELTS, it was important, but not the most important thing in my life. There's other things, other duties that I have to family, building relationship with other people. So that was my general approach. And then the night before, I try to sleep enough. And then also, having the right attitude to it. Like, it's, can be very anxious, feels like everything depends on it, whether you can come to Australia or even stay in Australia or not. But to, pray about it and also try your best and identifying the desire. Like at the start, we talked about like why you're doing it. Recognizing why you're doing it helps as well, so that you know why you're doing it, and you can address if you have any anxiousness that come up from the IELTS. It's important. Yeah, and happy to take any questions, or we can have a discussion among ourselves for some of the different sections, if you have them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's your exact scores and all of that? I mean, because I'm comparing myself and I'm like, wow, so that's what a high performer looks like. Because I didn't compare. I 3 times, I paid $900 for all the 3 tests. And if I could do more, I did more.
Yeah.
So can I know what
So,
all these
so when I prepare, I tried very hard because I know I want to get my PR as soon as possible, and IELTS is like a requirement before you apply. And when you book the IELTS, it's like you have to. It's not like you can take it tomorrow, right? You have to wait like a month or 2 months. So if you fail, you have to wait it's like 15 days before your result come out. Then you have to book it again. So I decided I just want to do it one time, and then get it over and done. And I also didn't expect I did do the wrong one, so I actually do it twice. But anyway, the score, like, I got the first one that I did, like, I think it's listening and reading is 9 for both the academic and the general one. And then it's 8.5 for the general for speaking and writing. But when I did the academic one, my speaking improved from 8.5 to 9. But my writing remained at 8.5. Yeah.
So he's a native English.
Yeah, so I like
Guys.
I learned English from the start. Like for my work, I'm on the computer every day typing report. Yeah, so like my work is writing report for the boss, you know, like policy, legislation in Singapore.
But I think even though that's the case, like in the time that he put in the time to understand the exam and practice the type of questions, I think it has changed. Like, you know, like whether that's speaking, like we said, you know, you speak too long, too short, or even writing. Even though we write on a daily basis, like for English speakers, you write English stuff. But that structure of that specific exam, you know, like what Shawn said about getting your introduction and your for and against argument, and then having the conclusion. Like just having that structure gets you like about half a marks really. So not completing that, you know, just because we're not familiar with the timing or whatever it is. Like I think over time that he practiced, like from what I could see, it would have been better. Like as time went by, as in that time when he started, I don't think it was like, you know, just 9 just because you speak English. Like,
Yeah. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is we all start at we have different level of competency in English, definitely. But the purpose of my sharing was more to share how I prepared, like how I looked at the exam, see where your strengths are, and then try to improve on those. See where your weaknesses are, recognize what they are, but then also realize, what can I do to overcome the weakness, or how can I get a higher score in areas that I'm good at, so that I can overall, when you average it out, I can get slightly higher. Yeah.
like some things are easy to practice, like the structure or the timing or something like that. That's something that you can practice and achieve. Like if it's something else like, you know, like pronunciation or if your range of vocabulary isn't that good. I mean, that's your daily life sort of thing. That's probably harder to fix. But if it's because you're speaking too fast in the, you know, in the exam or something, that's something that you can fix pretty easily. So we were like, I think he was mainly looking for those type of things to
find out the areas that you can it's like 3 mark, like write more, don't speak less than 2 minutes. That's like make sure you don't lose any marks. That's like one thing that you can do. Or like make sure you don't write less than how many words. Yeah, that's easy things to get. And then when you know the structure, you're less anxious as well on the day doing the exam. So I found like the process of looking what exactly I have to do helpful.
As you say, you as much in speaking as in writing, it's not your recommendation or advice is not memorized. But in my first exam, I think about not in speaking, but maybe in writing to get some, sentence that saved my life. If I'm not sure that I fulfill all the goals.
Yeah.
And that I can meet with all kind of,
okay.
it could be, you know what I mean?
Writing or speaking? Writing.
Writing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, writing.
To know that you can maybe use a couple of sentences that you can use in any.
Yeah. I think it's good. I think the danger is if you use it wrongly, very obvious. That it's
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
But if you use it correctly, then really good. So usually so for the structure, like introduction, I know like roughly how I want to organize the introduction. Then for and against, I'll always choose a word like one of the advantages of, like that's my standard start. Or like proponent. So like proponent means people for this argument say something. So I'll use like proponents say that, blah, 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 blah. So I memorized the word proponents. And opponents. Opponents means people who disagree with you. So I memorized like proponents, opponents. And then conclusion, I memorized in conclusion or in summary or to sum things up. Like I memorized the first how to open it. So I agree with you. You can memorize like the start of each thing, comma, but the behind you can't memorize because you don't know what question
You
is going
don't know
to be.
what is the topic.
Yeah.
But maybe I might, I was there. Maybe he have that trick that can share with us, and he have a sentence which can meet with the and match with every topic.
Yeah. So I think like these websites, like from here you can get linked to more. But I think this guy, if I remember correctly, he has like the standard way, and then like what you said, the first part and then blank. So you just fill in the blank, but use the same way.
Okay.
I think you're right. For writing, it's a very template. Like you just fill in the gaps. Like at the start, you'll summarize whatever the question is. What's an example of a question? Too long. Okay. Should technology be used in schools or something?
Yeah, something like that.
So your introduction always has something about that question, and then what you're going to argue, like in that. So it's always standard. The structure is standard, and then you'll have 4, proponents say
that technology
whatever.
is useful for teaching because it allows the students to
And then you give 3 points or 2
points, and then for example, yeah.
And then against, but others say, or but
detractors say, or
the downsides are, whatever terminology you choose to say, and then 2 points for that, and then in conclusion, blah blah blah. And then you wrap things up. So I think it's okay to make a template. It's fine, and you just practice using that template for your different.
If I just may add, I'm the band 7 in writing, and it's the only area I actually prepared. So what I did is that I was looking for a template. This is my personal template. I always start with a statement, like you say, online teaching is being used more in education nowadays. I'm going to say that's my statement. Online teaching is being used more every day in schools. Then next I will start with the positive statement. As we say, proponents for. Online teaching is beneficial for the world because it provides more access to students who are not able to go to school. I'll start with a positive, and then I will go with a negative point.
Yeah.
2 positives, 2 negatives. I would say
Exactly.
the only bad thing about online teaching is that you need a connection to the internet. So those are 2 negative things, and then I'm gonna go compare. Despite the lack of access of some students, I still think that it's still beneficial to adapt online teaching because of the benefits it creates. So you see, I compare the negative and the positive in that statement. And then next I'm going to go and finalize my statement. Therefore, I conclude, I believe we should support online teaching in education moving forward.
Yeah, well, for this is a good example that how you when it's the topic the question is give your opinion. That my opinion is that I agree. You have words say a sentence that you can use always in any topic.
Yeah, but that's I'm telling you what Shawn provides you more is something that will go beyond a 7. Because this is my strategy to get a 7.
Yeah.
And it works.
That's important for it's very.
It will
important
get you a 7. I think.
7 is hard.
But what you need to develop more is again expand your vocabulary and be able to unwrap the complexity of the question. So I think if you go visit that website, it will allow you to unwrap things better.
Yeah.
Because what I did is a very simple, loaded template. Just general statement, positive, negative, comparison, therefore conclusion.
But I think it's a good place to start. That's
It is a good place to
where
start.
you should start.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you.
That's a 7.
And I think in terms of practicing, when you're practicing, so sometimes, if you're writing this 40-minute or whatever thing, that takes ages and you should do it a couple of times. But one of the things to practice really is to think about what you're going to fill those, that thing that he told, brainstorm the first 5 minutes or something, your structure. So just write 1 or 2 words or 1 or 2 lines about each paragraph. So practicing that bit is
Exactly.
like it's
But
25 minutes per
yeah.
question, but you can look at lots of questions and then come up with like lots of, you know, little things that you might fill the template with, and then practice a couple of like actual full things. But because there's lots of questions online, you don't want to write a full thing for like every single one of them. But you want to practice being able to, in a very short time, make those arguments, and then filling it in like later on if you have more time. And especially when you come closer to exam, I think like you should just practice, you know, brainstorming that template.
I've got a question. So just now you mentioned some words like plateau and exponentially. Where can we find words like that?
Was it wrong?
Because as in, yes, we know how to use flat, increase, whatever. But when it comes to higher words like this, I haven't seen them anywhere.
It kind of, as I practice, so the how I came up with it was I didn't search anywhere. It was more I practiced and I made the word and I was like, oh, that's a good word. So then I record it somewhere to say I'm going to use this word next time. So every time when I write and I think of something, or when I read like a report or something, and oh, that's a good word, I write it down in a book. So it's more of a compilation rather than there's a site to use that.
Got it. Where's your compilation? Let me share it.
But it's not in here online.
There's a Microsoft Word has a function like thesaurus.
Thesaurus,
yeah. So if you type one word, that give you other words to say. So to diversify how you speak and how you write as well.
Yeah. So as a like English native writer, I use that as well. So because sometimes if you use the same word, increase, this increase, that increase, like it's pretty. You know when you read it, it's not very fluent. So I use that as well. So I'll say, oh, it might be, you know,
So like
upward trend or something, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's a good word. But I guess if you see those words, it's good to, if you're not familiar with them, like it's good to check with someone, like who speaks native English, I suppose, to see whether it's the correct usage. Because I think some people put in like complicated things, but then it's not the appropriate place to put it in. But the thesaurus is really good. Use it all the time.
Yeah, and also during each day, possibly as Shawn shared, that you write down the words, possibly on a diary, so you can come back again. So accumulation of words as well.
So like example this one, right? So increase, you can say increase slowly, or you can say increase marginally every year. Like you just slowly you think, and then after that you say, oh, it peaked at this, and then slowly decrease, or like crept downward or something. So like up, I have made a list of things like increase, peak, jumped, like just make a list. So it's already in my mind. So when I do the exam, I'm not thinking of what word to use. It's really like 10 words that I can pick. And then down is like dropped, decreased, plunged, whatever, like a few. Like just 3 or 4 for each one so that you can mix it around.
Can you share with us quickly, like, what are the trends that you can see in a graph? I know that it can be an upward trend, a downward trend, a flat trend, a curved trend. Is there any other trends that should we be wary of?
When the trends
Fluctuate.
Fluctuate. Yeah, see, that's it to me. Fluctuate, goes up and down. But that's for bar graphs. How do you describe a pie graph? Because I think these bar graphs is easy.
It's about proportion. So I made like 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. Like even writing that gives you marks, you know, like so don't write 4/5 on your exam. Like, you know, we used to write 4/5, like FOUR dash FIFTHS, 4/5, instead of 4/5. Or half is not half, but like HALF, not 1/2.
If you write that, those are points right there.
Yeah, that's points. Yeah. So like
Oh, I
I got
Good
pi, I
point.
got pi graphs the first few tests.
no, don't write numbers.
No, as in generally, so if number is under
Under
10, you write words.
Yeah.
So it's more possibly it's over 10, you write
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah. So it's not, but 77% is 77%, not 77%. Don't write it out like that. But certain things like 4/5, you can write
Half. Yeah.
half
Third.
instead of write the sign in half.
So earlier we were about trends. This one is more about proportion. Which one is greater,
Yeah,
Smaller,
greater, smaller,
equal,
yeah.
or bigger compared to the other side? So that's it. What about this one?
This is about location. So this one practices your language on where things are, like located adjacent. So you can say like or maybe like the pier is south of the island, or like
Center.
yeah, or like the restaurant is in the middle of the island, like the reception is in the middle of the island, and then there's a beach to the west.
And circle of houses.
Yeah. Or you can say the houses are generally like arranged in 2 rings or something like that. Yeah.
It's more about describing.
Yeah,
like,
describing
how it's all
things.
located on the map.
Yeah.
I wish I knew these things before. The only time I ever passed the IELTS writing is when I got the line graph or the bar graph.
Yeah, I guess you can also mention the pattern. Possibly more buildings are built on the this side, or more populated
So
in one area.
like the west of the island is more developed than the east, for
Yeah,
example. It
something.
might be the overall description or something like that.
So identify the locations on the map as
Yeah.
well as the patterns that you actually easily recognize. So those are the techniques for the maps.
And also it's east and west. Let me see. East. Depending on the if they give you a map or not, but it's not right and left. That's the main thing. Like on the map, it's not right and left. Yeah.
As a math is generally as harder than those charts, possibly.
Maybe because we use it less.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
use
yeah,
less.
it's not often seen.
With data like this, should we avoid making inferences or
Yeah,
assumptions?
don't need to explain why. So you don't have to say petrol and oil increase because of industrialization. Like no marks for
Or
that.
because of trade war.
Yeah, because of trade war. No need to say anything.
Avoid that.
Yeah.
It's like gonna say I'm expecting my petrol allowance to go up
Yeah,
because
no
petrol
marks
oil's
for
going up.
yeah. It's just explain what's happening.
Yeah, I think with the you had the slide before that says, so you give an overall thing like, US energy consumption has got is projected to go up, and then you say, for example, this has gone up. But yeah, and then I think you said give a highlight or low light or something like that. So it started off at whatever that is, and then it has gone up to this in this year. So like instead of saying, oh, well, in this year and then in this year and then in this year or something, like you just do the most prominent points. Like say this one, the most prominent is that it peaked in this year, and then it's a downward trend until whatever that year is. So pick like 2, maybe like the lowest or the highest or whatever stands out the most, and talk about that. I think in your last slide it said that you don't want to describe every like local and national and mobile and like everything, because it'll just take too long. Just highlight.
Another thing that is that you can identify the trends, but also the patterns alongside with it. Like I can see this whole line graph set. It looks like there's a correlation with the increase of coal and natural gas until 2015.
Yeah.
They were like slowly increasing together, fluctuating together, but then it flatlined and just tapered off and had no relationship to each other. And then you can actually say again, nuclear, solar and wind, hydropower have a very flat growth compared with one another. So I think that's again two things to point out: trends and the patterns or relationships they had with each other.
Mm. And then one more thing I forget to point out is tense. So this graph is actually testing you on your past present tense. Yeah, so be careful, because let's say if you're taking the exam today is 2019, right? We're about here. So when you say between 1980 to 2019, consumption of coal, natural gas increased, and then after that from here it's not increased anymore. It's from 2019, like coal consumption is expected to increase. Yeah, so be careful, especially when future past. Be careful with that.
That's amazing. That's a revelation to me. I've always thought that these were like they took it out of a book that they repeat.
But they're testing your grammar. Yeah.
It's contemporary.
Yeah. So history and projections. Yeah, it's quite obvious that they're trying to test your ability. So as long as you're able to demonstrate that, you're getting marks there.
Shawn,
Yeah.
can you just share with us the YouTube channel you used for the speaking materials?
Oh, can we search online?
What search terms did you?
Like what is going to happen?
Let's get started.
That's exactly what they're
This is
recording.
the speaking test of the International English Language Testing System taking place on Saturday the 11th of March at Beacon Centre, Centre number BN367. The candidate is Sabrine Valencherry and the candidate number is 0003400. The examiner is Carol Kennedy and the examiner number is 433816. Good afternoon. What is your full name, please?
My full name is Sabrine Valencherry.
And what should I call you?
You can call me Saba.
May I see your identification, please, Saba?
Yes, here it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Did they actually write that?
Now, in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about where you live. Where do you live in your country?
I live in Hyderabad, which is the capital of Andhra Pradesh, in the southeast of India. It is a very big city. About 7 million people live there.
And is it an interesting place to live?
Oh yes, a very interesting place to live. Hyderabad has a very long history. So there are lots of ancient forts, mosques and other monuments. There is a very beautiful lake and there are also lots of wonderful markets.
And will you live in Hyderabad in the future?
Yes, I think once I finish my studies here, I'll go back to Hyderabad. My husband is from Hyderabad too,
whether you
so
say
I
yes or
think
no, I want to go
we'll
back,
stay
doesn't
there.
matter. As
Now
long
let's
as you
talk
can
about
keep talking.
hobbies
So
and
don't worry,
interests.
just choose one
What
option
hobbies
and just keep
interests
talking.
are popular in your country?
People have many different pastimes in my country. I think the most popular these days are things like gardening and do-it-yourself, which is when people, usually men, make things for their home. I think women tend not to have too many hobbies. You can't really call shopping a
Doesn't
hobby.
matter on the opinion here as well. No
I think in the past, women used to fill up the leisure time that they had with craft activities, but sewing and knitting aren't so common these days. I think reading is still very popular, especially now these days with many e-readers.
And which hobbies and interests do you enjoy?
Well,
here I remember
like a
first
lot
I
of
can
people,
talk about where
my
I come
work
from,
takes up
and
a
then I
lot of
also
my
think
time,
like, okay,
and at the
I can
weekend I
think
like to
about
meet up
hobbies.
with
So I
my
already prepare in
friends
my head
or
like,
go
I
out
can
with my
talk about
husband.
hobbies
So
and where
I don't really have much
by
time for
watching this
hobbies,
video, like the
but I do read a
inspiration.
lot, especially history and biography. Also, I love collecting art, so I go to a lot of art fairs. I really like colourful, abstract art, which really brighten up our homes.
And what hobbies and interests did you have as a child?
Gosh, That was a long time ago. Let me think.
Yeah, you can do that.
I used to
No problem.
collect
You can
gears.
say like, oh,
I think I had
that's a hard
about
question.
20 or
And you buy
25.
yourself like
They
3
were
seconds
silly
to
things,
think.
really.
But
But
don't
from
say
a small
"um."
child,
Yeah, don't say So
I
like no good, but
used
like
to
oh,
painting
like good
and
question,
drawing.
and then like
My
what's
parents
the
were
It's
very
what
supportive
people
and
do
they
in
bought me a lot
conferences
of
all the
oil
time.
paints, but I'm not really very talented. I also played the
or like
clarinet.
oh, I didn't expect
I
that
was in a
question,
junior
and then
orchestra.
answer the question.
I remember once we played a concert and my reed broke during the first piece, and so I couldn't make any sound.
And do you think parents should encourage their children to have a hobby or interest?
Oh yes, very much so. I think it is very important for children to have something other than school, television and computers. Sometimes a hobby can turn into a very successful career, but even if it doesn't, it can help the child develop as a person as they learn about new things and meet new people who share the same hobby.
Now let's move on to talk about the weather. Do you prefer hot weather or cold?
I think I prefer cold weather. I know most people prefer hot weather, but it is always so hot in my country that it is such a nice change to feel the cold. Of course, in the cold, it's very easy to put on a hat and gloves to keep ourselves warm.
Tell me about the weather in your country at different times of year.
India is so big that there are many different climates. So I'll just talk about the weather in Hyderabad. Generally, we have a tropical wet and dry climate. That means that the summers, March to June, are hot, over 30 degrees, and very humid. Sometimes it can reach over 40, which is just unbearable. At the end of the summer, the monsoon comes, and it rains for about 3 months. After the rainy season, it's winter, which is quite short, just a couple of months.
Which time of year did you enjoy most as a child?
You notice like there's past question as well. Where did you live?
I think like most
Then you
children,
answer
I would
past
say
tense.
the
I
summer,
lived in
when we had the
where.
long school
Or you
holiday.
say where do you
But,
think you want to go in the future?
I always
And then
preferred
your question,
spring.
your answer is in the future. I
There's
hope
something
to.
so lovely
So your
about
tense
when
is
everything
different.
starts
Like
to grow
past,
again
present
after the winter.
tense, future
You
tense.
can almost smell
They'll
it in
test
the
you
air.
this part.
And has the weather changed much in your country in recent years?
I don't think so, really. I know that in some countries the climate has been changing because of global warming, but where I live, it seems to be the
Yeah, I
same.
can stop it. Yeah, so in
Just
general,
heat.
the part like that's the
YouTube channel.
yeah YouTube channel. I think I like this guy. Oh, this guy was my inspiration.
Writing's not that easy,
I think
but
so.
Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Let me
Let's
see.
talk about what you do.
A boy that I don't know now, but was a very good childhood friend of mine, was called Hector.
Yeah, this guy. Yeah, this is Spanish, right?
Yeah,
He's good. Yeah.
So a good way to answer these questions, I think the other girl didn't do it much, is that you give a story. So you think of a few stories that are, easy to talk about any sort of situations, and then you put that in your answer. So, for example, when she says, "Oh, what do you like about the weather?" I mean, it's very bland to say like it's hot and whatnot. Like, but if you say, "Oh, like the weather's really hot," and this time when I went back, I had to there was this time that I was trying to jog and it was so hot that I was sweating, and something that is a bit more connection. So, everyone has stories. You can make a story about any of these things.
Yeah,
So,
but you need to know vocabulary because
the
in your
vocabulary.
language maybe you can
Yeah.
explain woo, but
Yeah, that's right.
you have to find the words
Yeah.
and how you have to form the sentence.
Form the
So that's
sentence.
take a
Yeah.
little bit. Keep practicing.
Yes, yes.
Is the
So when you practice that
Exactly.
introduction,
You
so
have to speak.
where do you come from?
Hmm.
And you say, oh, so I came to this place, from this place, and when I was growing up, it was like this, and
Yeah.
for example, there was this time, something.
Yeah.
Something. So you can practice that.
Yeah.
That one is
beforehand.
3 marks. Like the starting, you can go off a little bit, but not
Not
too long.
Too long.
Not tell a big
Or
story
where do
for
you
4
live
minutes.
now? So, when I first moved here, it was such a cultural shock to live in Darwin because
Yeah, that 3 marks cultural shock.
Cultural shock. That's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
phrase.
Like, where do you live? Oh, I live
That's
in
a good-
cultural
yeah.
shock, and then
You
that's
know,
3
I
marks
came
already.
from this big city into Darwin, and the shops weren't even open. Whatever, so your story, I think it's a little bit easier to talk about than the city has, you know, this many suburbs
Yeah,
and this
there's
many
200
roads.
suburbs, or like,
Something like that, no? The word.
Plus
I
this-
heard there's 200 km of roads and they're organized by this professor named, oh no.
And this is more conversational, right? It's
Yeah.
not exactly like if you write it down on paper, they're gonna, you know, grade
Yeah,
you on
yeah.
it.
So yeah, I guess good point. It's not testing your knowledge, this section. It's testing your ability to communicate in daily life. Yeah.
I mean, I remember my question. I was asked, "So Marty, do you like swimming?" And I responded, "No, I could not swim to save my life. Put me on water and I will sink like a rock."
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was.
Yeah,
was
so
it.
you, I
I'm
mean,
proud of that
you can
answer.
have something like that. And
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like, oh yes, I'm great, like, you know, I love
Mhm.
swimming, but something like that.
Yeah.
would be
Yeah, you just
fine.
say what you feel.
Yeah.
And then say, oh, and you know, the story behind that is that when I was like
Young.
5 years old,
Yeah.
you know, I went into a pool and then I felt like I was almost, you know,
It's most likely my uncle threw me into that tall slide when I was 5 years old, so he just threw me there without.
well,
knowing
there
I
you
could
go.
swim.
There's a
Yeah.
good story.
Good story.
No, back to the water. Yeah. I guess if you go pause and they see that you're really unsure of what you're trying to say, that's every second you become anxious, they demerit you, I suppose.